Hello, welcome to this new podcast, which is a follow-up to the previous one about the obstacles and difficulties on the twin flame journey. I'm going to talk about blockages by starting from my own experience. This will allow me to discuss the different types of twin flame or sacred couple journeys and the reasons that explain their variety. I wanted to do this because my own journey is very different from those of the people who usually make videos on this topic. I think it's important to explain this because it shows the diversity of possible journeys. This will also allow me to share the insights I've gained in order to help everyone who is on this very challenging initiatory journey. At the end of this podcast, I will detail the three main types of journeys corresponding to three types of twin flames, as well as the objectives that characterize them. What I am about to reveal to you is, to my knowledge, unprecedented. I have never heard anyone talk about this, nor have I read about it in any books on twin flames. I'm sharing this at the end of the podcast because it requires the development that follows. I often use the term sacred couple because that's how my higher consciousness refers to this connection, and according to it, the term twin flame is a human concept for humans. All the classic accounts refer to journeys that take place in person, with regular physical meetings and frequent abundant messages in the material world. The pair see each other at work or within the same social circle and during regular meetups. Some even have intimate relationships with their counterpart, even during periods of separation. I don't relate at all to these journeys, so I'm going to share my own experience in this podcast so that twin flames who are on a similar path can get the clarity they need. This isn't about talking about myself or my life, but about highlighting the uniqueness of my situation. I won't give any details that could identify my counterpart, nor will I mention their first name. These podcasts are meant to help you, not to put ourselves in the spotlight, because in my case, the reconnection happened through social media. I watched a YouTube video made by my counterpart who lives in the United States because the topic interested me and I felt a strong urge to watch it. The video was of course in English, but with the automatic subtitles, I could understand it. I immediately liked her video and felt an instant connection and attraction to this girl. But then my rational mind took over and I told myself, this girl is nice and cute, but she's far away and I live in France. This was in February 2022, right in the middle of the COVID crisis. This will have an impact, which I will come back to later. But in the hours that followed, thoughts of her became obsessive for no apparent reason. The telepathy started the next day, along with the synchronicities. I felt her presence as if it were physical, and on the astral level, that was the case. She was there. There is another sign that confirms the sacred connection, which I haven't mentioned in the podcast dedicated to signs because it's very particular and, in my opinion, quite rare. I told you in previous podcasts that I am an animal communicator, and for that, you have to connect to your wonderful space and invite the animal's consciousness to come in. Everyone has one. It's an energetic space where our consciousness resides and where the consciousness of other living beings can connect. I discovered mine during animal communication training in 2019. Inside it, there was a Native American teepee and a plateau at the edge of a cliff, then snow-capped mountains against a blue sky, a typical landscape of the southwestern United States, and I understood its meaning later on. A few days after the reconnection in 2022, I did some animal communications, and to my surprise, my other was there in my wonderful space. Its surface doubled, adding a lake and a farm. And the craziest part is that the animals could see it too, because they see us in this space just as I see them. And since then, she's always present when I connect to it, and it has become our shared, wonderful space. I thought I was going crazy, but fortunately, I already had the ability to communicate with my higher consciousness, which at that time, I took to be my guardian angel. He explained the situation to me and that we form a sacred couple, as well as the role and necessity of such couples during this period of transition at the end of the Iron Age, the age of Kali or Kali Yuga. So the reconnection did not happen physically as a result of an actual meeting, like in most journeys. And so the honeymoon phase also happened separately. In my case, this led to a better state of being. My financial situation improved, my body changed for the better, and I was on cloud nine knowing that I had found the woman of my life and even of all my lives. But we didn't have a relationship as a couple or any intimate relations like most twin flames do at the beginning of their journey, because it was impossible to travel at that time due to COVID. So this journey was immediately marked by separation. I wrote to her, and of course, she didn't reply. It's an incomprehensible position. On an energetic level, I could feel her presence. We communicated telepathically, and I have concrete proof that these communications gave me real information that I couldn't have made up or guessed, in addition to the presence of daily synchronicities, not to mention the constant repeating numbers. But nothing in the physical world. It's a situation that can drive you crazy. But since I knew she was my twin flame, all the energetic responses showed me that my true self had no doubt, but my ego wanted proof, concrete facts. This is one of the problems of the chaser, which I am, wanting proof in the material world and therefore chasing the other with too many messages, letters that of course never get a reply, because this journey is about letting go of the ego and following your higher consciousness, rising up without proof. Blessed are those who have believed without seeing. René Guénon, the greatest Western specialist in esotericism and the primordial tradition, explains that true knowledge comes through intuition and the guidance of one's higher consciousness. Consciousness should not be confused with the word used for the brain corresponding to the active state outside of sleep. When I use the word consciousness, I am talking about our true self connected to the source, our immortal part, and not the soul. The soul makes the connection between the physical and energetic bodies and the higher consciousness. The soul is the bridge between two worlds. And twin flames do not have a soul split in two, that's impossible, but rather share the same higher consciousness. To return to my story, I sent gifts and letters that led to nothing, at least to no response. At that point, someone reasonable who thinks with their mind would say, I'll just give up. Moreover, reaching out to a famous YouTuber in a foreign country is senseless. But that's true for people who aren't twin flames, who have never experienced this otherworldly attraction and the sense of certainty you feel if you're truly in contact with your other half. For all chasers who are at the beginning of their journey, the most important thing you can do is to detach yourself as quickly as possible from your ego's fears and follow your intuition, not to chase your other half to fill that lack and emptiness, which comes from unconscious abandonment or rejection programs. At this stage, you can already see that our journey is unique compared to the usual path. But I was still on cloud nine for several months, and I didn't feel the need to look for information about twin flames, as my higher consciousness had explained to me the purpose of all this, and that we would be reunited in the future. So for me, the obstacle was the distance. I thought everything would go smoothly if I went to see her in the USA, especially since spirituality has always been a part of my life and I have continuously worked on myself, and before this reconnection I was already living mostly in the present moment despite my financial problems, and in fact higher consciousness does not lie. It points to a possible timeline, but without indicating the work and all the obstacles that need to be overcome to get there. It is our mission in this incarnation to move forward on our own, here on Earth. And as I already mentioned, in addition to the COVID rules that made traveling more complicated, I also didn't have the money because of a real estate issue that had been going on for years and had cost me a lot of money. But the attraction I felt for her was so strong that I found solutions to finance the trip. I gave lectures for an association, which brought me a bit of money. I sold the last valuable items I had left and completely emptied my storage units where my furniture was kept. My mother helped me too, as did some friends. That's the role of this kind of relationship, to push us out of our comfort zone and our routine. So, in September 2022, I bought the plane ticket because even if I was on cloud 9, that's not a means of transportation. So off I went by plane to the USA. I wrote to her on Instagram before leaving, thinking everything would go smoothly. Sure, I'm naive, but if our twin flame is the person we're meant to be with, why would it be complicated? Well, I understood that with this trip. I went to her studio telling myself she'll welcome me and might even let me stay with her. On top of being naive, I'm also very optimistic. And besides, she's my sacred wife really. But that's in the 5D, and not yet in the 3D actually. For starters, she didn't come to pick me up at the airport. Okay, you might say that's normal, she didn't know me. So the next day I arrive at her studio and the door is closed. She doesn't open the door for me. Then her ex-partner shows up and tells me she's very busy and doesn't have time to see me. Back to the hotel, and that's when the dark night of the soul begins. Am I crazy? What am I doing in the USA gonna see a stranger? Those were really the questions I was asking myself. But also, how do you explain all the signs and the telepathy? And for 3 days, I was completely at a loss. But I'm resilient, and it was a huge blow to my ego. Back to France without seeing her, but with unexpected hotel expenses paid with a deferred debit card. Fortunately, when I got back, a friend asked me to clear out his garage, and I sorted the metals and sold them, which paid for the hotel. This shows that this trip was truly intended and approved by Providence, and that my guardian angels always find solutions. In the end, the trip was very positive because it allowed me to take responsibility for myself and make my own decisions. Except that at that point, I started watching videos and card readings to get answers, and it became addictive for a few months. Here our journey reaches the moment of the first separation from the usual paths, which triggers the famous dark night of the soul. I understood why it couldn't have been any other way. At the moment of reconnection, the souls are immersed in happiness and the personalities are free from their fears for a few weeks or a few hours, which allows for the physical honeymoon, the reunion of the two bodies. This continues until the first separation, when the higher consciousness places veils over the runner and pushes them into their addictions in order to reject the chaser and force the latter to release the traumas they carry, as mentioned in the previous podcast. But in our case, between the reconnection and the physical meeting, 7 months went by and his personality had already taken over again. But at the time, I was far from understanding all of this. So, in addition to card readings, I started watching twin flame videos, although they didn't really help me much because I didn't recognize myself in what was being said. Rather than blaming my counterpart, knowing for sure that he was indeed my twin flame because of all the signs that appeared every day, I started trying to understand the situation and to ask my guardian angel for answers. So I understood that this rejection is a reflection of the patterns I was carrying and that this is the mirror function of the runner. Understanding it is one thing, but dealing with the longing and the distance is very difficult. After a few months, I started reading Eckhart Tolle's book on the power of the present moment again. And at that time, I discovered 2 YouTube channels dedicated to twin flames, but with a more spiritual perspective, which confirmed to me that this was indeed the right path. You have to work on your traumas, your fears, and the blockages in your life, but also manage to stay in the present moment by detaching yourself as much as possible from the longing for your other. I managed to do it, and during the summer of 2023, I decided to go see her again in America, because through telepathy, she had been asking me to come for several weeks. That's our main mode of communication, along with the meaningful messages she posted on Instagram or XX Twitter. But I didn't have the money, and at that time, my real estate problem had already been going on for 5 years. And since the beginning, I had been trying to unlock my 3 retirement investments without any success. But once I made the firm decision to return to America in August, my guardian angel told me, send this document from Paul Emploi and you will get the money. In fact, I had a document indicating the end of my unemployment benefits following my last salaried job before I started working for myself as a therapist in 2019. I sent that document, and on the very same day, the 3 insurance companies, which had been telling me for years that it was impossible, released the money. I didn't become a millionaire, but it was enough to travel. On a twin flame journey, anything is possible if it aligns with our consciousness. The entire trip was arranged telepathically since she doesn't respond directly to messages. She told me, arrive on this date in September 2023 and come to my workshop the next day at 9 a.m. All of this was through telepathy. So I bought the plane ticket for the specified day and set off for the USA again with no guarantee except trust in the relationship and telepathy. On the agreed day, there I was, heading to her workshop for 9 in the morning. I was still a bit nervous, and then to my surprise she was outside unpacking her things. I parked and walked up to her, and we talked together for 2 hours without noticing the time go by. I visited her workshop, and despite my beginner's English, we understood each other well enough. We felt like we were in a bubble, and the moment was magical. Until she realized the time and understood that she was very late, I invited her to a restaurant, and she agreed for the following Wednesday, without hesitation, and pointed out some places to visit in her area. However, my other work is non-stop and didn't allow me to go with her. But it's already miraculous to have met her, and above all, to realize that when we're together, everything is easy, which confirms the connection between us. And I also understood on the spot why she had asked me to come that day and not the day before, because she had worked with her ex-boyfriend on tasks she couldn't do alone. So for a few days I visited the area where she lives. Then came the dinner reservation at the restaurant at 5 p.m. I thought I had misunderstood because of my English, but that was really the time. The restaurants open at 5 p.m. and close around 9 p.m. She was there, but so was her ex-boyfriend. The same one who had stopped me from seeing her a year before. But I didn't feel any animosity toward him. The meal went very well, except that her boyfriend, sensing the growing closeness between us, cut the meeting short as soon as the meal was over. My other half kept talking to me and would have liked it to last longer, but faced with her boyfriend's insistence, I left. That's my problem with being HP, highly emotionally gifted. When a situation gets out of my control, I lose my composure. We parted ways without making plans to see each other again because of her boyfriend's rush. In the following days, I continued sightseeing and went hiking in mountains more than 500 kilometers from her place. It was easier for me to manage by staying far away to control the urge to go see her. The day before I returned to France, I headed back to her city where the airport is. And during the beginning of the trip, I regretted not having arranged another meeting with her because she works alone and it's actually impossible to meet her at work since she locks herself in her studio to have peace and quiet and to film videos about her work. But at some point I told myself that I had been letting life just happen to me for too long and that I needed to decide for myself what I wanted to do. So I made the decision to go meet her without knowing if it would even be possible. And after that, there were a lot of synchronicities, like the time on the car clock at that exact moment, 12:21, and on the phone which was showing both the local time and the time in France, 12:21 locally and 21:21 in France. And then most of all, her first name in huge letters on a billboard in the middle of nowhere, like a wink from the angels to validate my choice. Of course, the billboard exists on its own. The synchronicity comes from the timing. This confirms that we live in a simulation created by our higher consciousness and that time and space are flexible. So, I arrive at her studio after several hundred kilometers. The door is open. I park in front and just as I enter, she comes in at the same time through the inner door. This coincidence is unlikely. I see it as a symbol. I enter this space through the outer door, the young side. I act in the material world, and she, through the inner door, the yin side, she acts in the subtle and in energy. I think she sensed energetically that I was coming and left the door open, even if it was unconscious. Another magical moment. We talk for over an hour, we take a selfie together, and everything goes well. I invite her to eat, but she declines because she really has too much work. The next day, back to France, and I thought she would write to me after those moments we shared. But no, already this trip confirmed the reality of our telepathic communications and that she truly is my twin flame. This was possible because I stayed as much as possible in the present moment and in trust, without trying to control anything. But after this meeting, she focused even more on her work. Following emotional releases and synchronicities, I decided to go back in November. All the more so because my other half had posted on social media that she had gone through a depression for a few days in October, but without explaining the reasons. I asked her telepathically to send me a sign approving this new trip by sending me a message on Instagram with the words "back" or "come back," and that's exactly what happened a few hours later. And then it's incredible. So back to the USA with the schedule and dates also set by telepathy, of course. And as I told you, my other half is constantly working. It's an addiction that has intensified since we met, but the difference with the previous trip is that I thought my other half had awakened to the connection, and I wanted to offer to work with her to help lighten her load. The controlling part, dictated by my fears, resurfaced. During the trip, I saw that my other half loved one of my comments under one of her videos. That's very rare, especially since the video was over 5 months old. I should have paid attention to the title of the video, which said, "Things are going badly and getting worse." And indeed, unlike the previous trip, she wasn't there at the agreed time. Not the next day either, but I waited for her. And she finally showed up. For 5 minutes, she was very happy to see me, but the chaser dynamic started up again when I explained that I wanted to help her because she was very tired and had gone through a depression. She denied having said any of that and told me she refuses my help. I gave her the gift I had brought, which made her very happy, but afterwards, she asked me to leave so she could get back to work. It took me several months to understand what had happened. The reality is that she reflected my desire to force things, to try to speed up the reunion in order to improve my situation and join her in America. But it wasn't possible. I hadn't freed myself from enough karma and blocking patterns. She could only push me away. I still did some sightseeing, but I didn't see her again. Whereas if I had gone back without any intention, just for the pleasure of seeing her without any expectations, we surely would have spent time together. For the chasers listening to me, the more you try to control your other and impose your will instead of turning inward and working on freeing yourself from your traumas and unconscious blockages, the more they will push you away or run from you. When I came back, realizing that I had my share of responsibility, I continued to work on emotional release, traumas related to repeated relationship difficulties, and I started the Mellow Method by Pascal Montagnac. It helped me. One point that seems very important to me is that if the runner reacts to the actions of their chaser, it's because they themselves have raw wounds, and the pressure from the chaser brings up their own fears that they have buried very deep inside. Through our shared actions, we reactivate in each other unresolved, unhealed wounds as well as karmic burdens so deep that only such an intense journey can bring them to the surface. This step is necessary because for the chaser to be able to release their own karmic burdens inherited from their family and past lives, as well as those of their counterpart, these burdens must first rise to the surface and be brought to light. Therefore, both must meet and engage in this cat and mouse dance so that everything can be purified. So, you shouldn't blame yourself for triggering a reaction in your counterpart, nor hold it against them for their blocks and rejections. It is a dance of liberation. Moreover, if you feel that you need to call your counterpart, send them a message or go see them if you can, and this urge comes from the heart and intuition, you should follow it. If you are guided to do it, then go ahead. But if it comes from the ego, take a step back and wait. The advice given in videos can be helpful, but you must be sovereign in your decision making. It is impossible to apply the same rules to every journey. So typical advice like, never call your counterpart, it's up to them to do this, it's up to them to do that, are pieces of advice coming from wounded egos and not from people inspired by consciousness. That's why I make a point of explaining the principles behind the veils, because once you understand what's happening, you can adapt it to your own journey. From the end of December 2023, I was much more at peace. Of course, I would have liked to go see her for Christmas. Her too, I think, because she started liking all my comments under her videos, which she did before each of my trips. But I had to save money to pay the legal fees for my trial, and I haven't been able to return to the USA since then. After this intense work, starting from January 2024, there was no longer any energetic backlash after sessions with therapists or others. And I managed to remain calm in the present moment, without suffering from lack, nor even from my material worries. I have reached the stage of completeness, and I think my counterpart is ready to see me again, even though she hardly communicates at all. After all, she works constantly and escapes into her work. Once the chasers reach the stage of completeness, you have to accept that the runner's work takes time. All the more so because my counterpart is famous in her field and her situation is fragile. Fame and the fear of losing everything strengthen the ego, making change even more difficult. That's why for me, being independent and free is a priority, so as not to add any burden to my counterpart. If there are any chasers who recognize themselves in this journey, I hope you find some help in what I'm sharing with you, because it's the runner who holds the keys to the reunion and will initiate it when it becomes possible. The priority is to let go, stay in the present moment, love yourself and your counterpart unconditionally, and follow your inner guidance, even if ego-driven projections in the 3D reality show something else. Distance still complicates everything, because when there is a physical meeting, the energy generated by both twin flames and the rise in vibrational frequency naturally eliminates the impurities present in the energetic bodies, and this accelerates the process. This is impossible in our situation. Even though astral travel is a reality for twin flames, it does not have the same effectiveness. The maintenance of this distance due to external causes slows down the progress of the journey. When I talk about external causes, I mean that they are not simply the reflection in our reality of our own inner programs, but rather forces that are trying to prevent the reunion. In my case, it is the impact of the length of this real estate lawsuit, 7 years in total, and the financial loss, more than 100,000 euros. The appeal trial for the sale of the property that I went through was supposed to take place in November 2021. The opposing party managed to postpone the case with fake documents, claiming that I was not paying the damages even though I was, and the bailiff confirmed it. But their secretary forged a document saying that I wasn't paying, and I don't know how that's even possible. The trial finally took place in November 2024, 3 years later. And during that time, I paid for a house with no hope of getting my money back. If I had gotten out of this situation before the reconnection, as was planned in November 2021, maybe everything would have been different. This brings me to talk about what we call evil, or the shadow. Of course, evil is part of creation. Nothing exists outside of the source. We are part of God. We are even God, the source, but he created hierarchies, levels that have distanced us from the center and make us feel or believe in an illusory separation. We are not separated but distanced from God. This is the idea of the fall, and in this fall, there are also the fallen angels, the demons. In his book, The King of the World, René Guénon speaks of the right hand, which brings blessing, and the left hand, which brings justice and severity. On this occasion, he quotes a passage from the book The Jewish Kabbalah by Mr. Juliot, mentioning the tree of Sephiroth, which carries the same symbolism. On the right, peace and mercy, and on the left, the severity of justice. He says, if a man sins and distances himself from the Shekinah, he falls under the power of the forces that depend on severity. The Shekinah can be likened to God or the Holy Spirit. It is understood that if a man strays from virtue, certain forces have the power to act in order to make him change. These are, of course, the forces of evil. It's not your guardian angel who will harm you, even if it's for your own good and to bring you back onto the right path. These demons are compelled to work for the source, to act as a necessary evil. If evil acted only in this way, there would be no problem. But there is free will. God made creatures in His image, and therefore free. In doing so, the other expression of this evil is what is called the lower astral, which can be likened to purgatory. This energetic layer is necessary because it absorbs all the excess negative thoughts on this planet, as well as the energetic bodies of beings who do not ascend directly, although these are not their souls, but energetic bodies. This lower astral is therefore made up of demons acting on their own behalf, beings who are temporarily lost there, and advanced spiritual beings who have chosen to work for evil for their own benefit. At this level, they feed on elements of low vibrations, and so they try to ensure that humans produce as much of these as possible through wars, crises, and by controlling our leaders. This is the main source of the disorders in the world today. They are all the more active because we are at the end of the Iron Age. It is also important to know that the main gateways for these forces to use our energy are first and foremost the ego, and then all the unconscious programs we carry that distance us from ourselves by keeping us in fear and suffering. These forces act in three ways, primarily by targeting twin flames and star seeds, because our vibrational frequency means we emit more energy, and so if we suffer, we emit a lot of low vibration energy that they feed on. So they have been amplifying our problems since birth. This further confirms the need to transmute all karmic programs and unresolved suffering, as well as to detach from the ego in order to close these doors. If we are sufficiently liberated, the second action of these entities is to influence those around us, using them to create tension, arguments, or to complicate events in order to make us fall back into old patterns. Their third action is to prevent the union of sacred couples by excessively complicating the situation. Just like with my trial, by manipulating external factors to ruin me and prevent me from traveling. Along my journey, there were also letters that got lost, or for example, a flight strike the day before my first trip. These entities want to prevent our meetings because the vibrational frequency of a sacred couple united and in fusion is very high, and this contributes to the overall rise in the Earth's vibration. Once a certain threshold is reached, this vibrational frequency enables a shift in consciousness and paradigm, thus freeing the world, without any effort on their part to maintain their power and opening the way for the beginning of a new golden age. The more sacred couples are united, the faster and easier it will be, creating a ripple effect. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's clear that the chasers' priority is to close their doors and focus their work on purifying karmic baggage in order to reduce the influence of the shadow, all while staying as much as possible in joy and centeredness. As for me, they do act, but since I generally manage to stay in the present moment without anger, it reduces the effectiveness of their actions, which are then resolved through the intervention of Providence. To finish this podcast as promised, I'm going to reveal to you what I've understood about the different types of journeys and twin flames. Because as I said, I didn't recognize myself in what I was hearing. I really had to understand why it was so complicated for me to have relationships with girls in my life and why this kept repeating itself even with my twin flame. And if you followed me this far, you might notice some differences or similarities with your own journey. So I tried to understand the origin of these differences. Because there are twin flame channels where people are reunited with their other half, and on top of that, help other twin flames come together, and yet they haven't received the same explanations as I have. If I were coming from my ego, I would say they're wrong and I'm right. But no, we're all right. And that shows that there really are several types of twin flames. And my guardian angel helped me understand this. I'm specifically talking about twin flames in the sacred couple sense, not soul twins or karmic soulmate relationships. The first type of twin flame is the one described by Kurt from New World All-Star. These are people who are a double incarnation of the same higher consciousness, but without necessarily being a sacred couple. This helps explain the existence of homosexual twin flame couples, which wouldn't have an explanation in the context of a sacred couple. The reconnection and recognition come from the fact that it is the same higher consciousness. These people have gone through several repeated cycles of incarnation on this planet. Their past lives and their trauma take place here on this earth. They are human beings. The main work is to release the past life traumas of the pair, to achieve an opening to spirituality and a change in life in order to align it with spirituality rather than material possession. Physical relationships, including intimate relationships, are more common than energetic exchanges. These are typical twin flames, representing the majority of twin flames. The second type of twin flames corresponds to those described by the channel Flammes à Flammes, for example. This type is also reunited with its other half. She describes twin flames as souls who lived in Atlantis. In my opinion, these are starseeds, children of the stars, originating either from lost civilizations like the Atlanteans, the Lemurians, or at best, or coming from inner Earth or from star systems within our galaxy. The past lives of these twin flames have either mostly taken place on this planet, but during the eras of the civilizations I just mentioned, or on their planet of origin. Their level of consciousness at the start of life is higher than that of the first group. They do not feel like they belong in the world as it is. I'm not saying that the second group is superior to the first, I'm simply talking about their origins. This group corresponds to what is called the universal twin flame. The main work of this group is to purify the negative karma resulting from the fall of these civilizations, while also bringing back the knowledge they carry as well as their reality, or to make extraterrestrial civilizations known and allow us to benefit from their wisdom, to accomplish now what the Atlanteans failed to do. Relationships in the material world are just as important as energetic exchanges. They live ordinary human lives until they reconnect with their twin flame. The third group, to which I belong if my analysis is correct, which I call the sacred couple, is also made up of starseeds. But these ones come from worlds that have already succeeded in transitioning to a new golden age, or from worlds whose level of consciousness is far higher than that of Earth. The purpose of this group is to share the primordial tradition and the way to move toward this new golden age by purifying all the negative karma that cannot be transmuted by the other two groups. The members of this group also do not feel like they belong in this world. They can be likened to what some people call the chosen ones in their videos, even though I don't really like that term. Their lives are even more complicated than those of the first two groups and do not resemble a typical, ordinary human life. We have had very few friends and romantic relationships are very rare, if not non-existent. The professional path is very complicated, without any objective reason. In our case, physical interactions are in the minority until the reunion. And energetic exchanges are in the majority. There is a reason for this. Because the origin is more spiritual than material, in line with the work that is required of us. And the sacred earthly couple is a projection of a divine couple. The first two groups can meet a twin soul or a soulmate who serves as a catalyst to trigger change before meeting their twin flame. This is not possible for the third group because we are not in a relationship with anyone except our twin flame. Once again, no twin flame or human should say, I am superior because I am a twin flame or a starseed. I am offering explanations to help understand why there is such diversity in journeys and challenges. All starseeds, twin flames, and people of goodwill contribute to the creation of this new world in an equitable way. The hummingbird carries a drop of water that matches its size, while the elephant carries 100 liters in its trunk, but the effort is comparable for both. It is our external judgment about the quantity, that makes us believe the elephant would be superior to the hummingbird in this example. The suffering experienced on these journeys is not measured by the quantity or magnitude of the difficulties which are suited to what each pair can overcome, but by the way people experience them. And if my podcast has shed light on the meaning of these trials and helps you move beyond suffering by giving you hope and joy, then I am happy and fulfilled. If you are interested in the topic of the Iron Age and the New Golden Age, in addition to my lecture on the doctrine of cycles available on this YouTube page, I recommend 2 books by René Guénon, The Crisis of the Modern World and the Reign of Quantity and the Signs of the Times. So, to summarize these 2 podcasts about the purpose of the difficulties present during most of the lives of starseeds and twin flames. They are there to purify human karma and obsolete programs, making it possible to access a new golden age. It is not self-work that enables the reunion. What makes it possible is access to awakening, as described by Eckhart Tolle. And I also recommend reading his books as well as watching his videos. Once awakening is achieved, we step out of our egoic persona and align with our higher consciousness. This is completeness. This allows our runner to find the space to do their own inner work, leading to reunion. Reunion is not the goal of twin flames. The purpose of this journey is to initiate this new golden age in this generation. Reunion is a necessary step in the journey in the sense that it raises the vibrational frequency, enabling the paradigm shift. The next step is the fusion of the couple. This stage aims to fix and crystallize this vibrational frequency. Thank you for listening to this podcast, which I intended to be exhaustive. And if you enjoyed it, feel free to like it and share it with the twin flames you know. See you soon for upcoming podcasts. Take care of yourself.